Hello and welcome to What Now with Anna and Eric. This is going to be an exciting one. I'm Anna.
I am Eric, and I'm just excited to be here.
We already just in our pre-hash session have discovered this is going to be an interesting week. So hang on.
This might be my last week. I don't know. This might be the week I get fired.
But Eric's been saying that for like a year and a half, so I think
This
it's
just
fine.
might be it. We'll see.
Eric, what is your 3-word summary? Wait, let me go first. I'll do mine first.
Yeah, for sure.
Mine is my enemy's treatment, aka how to treat an enemy. I felt like that was a pretty big theme.
There you go.
Oh.
That was mine. Exactly.
Was that?
No,
Was that yours?
wasn't mine.
Word for word.
Mine is I am lost. I don't know where I'm at anymore. I don't know where I'm at in the Bible. It all runs together. I seriously think I'm in every section of the Bible right now with my readings.
Eric has never read so much of the Bible as he is reading right now. Our discussion was he's been joining every Bible plan there is out there, creating his own, inviting people.
So listen, I'm gonna go with catch-up tip. I'll start with my catch-up tip.
Okay, right? Go ahead. You could do
my
yours.
My catch-up tip is say no to some people when they ask if you want to read the Bible. You know, it's okay to say no. If you are doing a Bible plan with friends, if you're doing a read the Bible in a year plan, if you do a student Bible study through the book of John, and you are trying to then study the Bible for a couple theology class, don't do it. Just say no to something. Be okay. God's word will still be there. And you can, but yeah, I tried, and I just have to say that, you know what? I think I'm 4 days behind. I'm going to go through the checklist, and I'm going to spend some time just kind of getting through it and catching up. Next week, I promise I will be where I need to be.
All right.
Somewhere.
This is good, though, I think, in different ways, too, because, I mean, yours says say no to people asking you to read the Bible, which is something that you wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, yeah, I should definitely say no to that. But there are certainly other good things that we can say no to that will help us to get into the Word of God more. Because, you know, it seems pretty obvious to say no to the bad stuff. Like, well, yeah, I obviously shouldn't, get into all these bad habits. I should definitely set those aside and read the Bible more. But we don't often think about, like, okay, but there are some good things, like binge watching whatever your TV thing is right now, or or whatever it is, maybe it's your household projects and you're like, okay, I have time to do it now, so I got to do that. And because of that, we kind of set aside reading the Bible. So it can also be that, okay, what do you got to say no to? That's a good thing. Well, so you can get into the Word of God, which is a great thing.
I realized this week is for the past 2 weeks, I have taken the approach of, yeah, I don't have a schedule. Yeah, I've got free time. Yeah, let me check my schedule. And it was just all yeses. And then things switched this week where things were added to my schedule. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. This is
too many.
Like, I got too many things happening here. Like everything happened this week at 8:30 or 9 o'clock a.m. It seemed like everybody wanted to add something. And I think on Tuesday, I had 4 things on my schedule for 8:30 and 9 o'clock. And I'm like, wait, how did that happen? I don't know. So yeah, just, getting a rhythm, getting a schedule a little bit is helpful, and not being afraid to say no. Yeah. You don't have to read the whole Bible in 2 days. I think that's where I want. I think I'm going to be done with the whole Bible by the end of this week if I stick to this. Yeah. These plans. So,
all right.
We're in it.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to save mine for next week then, because I actually really like yours. This is a good one.
There you go. Oh, there you see, we got one in the can. Don't worry, we got that one. Love it.
Yes. One in the can, ready for next week, so that I am caught up on my catch-up tips, which is ironic to think about.
Caught up on catch-up.
Yeah, caught up on catch-up. Okay, so let's just get right into this.
Yeah, let's do it.
so much different. All right, here's the thing about the chronological Bible. It takes you everywhere. Like, we've gotten to the point where we've hit in multiple different books all happening during the same time frame. We didn't really end up in that at all in like Genesis, Job, or any of that, because that wasn't duplicated anywhere. I can't imagine how it's going to be once we get to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's going to be like 4 different versions of the same story, which is cool. But during this part, I mean, we took stuff from 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Chronicles, all sorts of weird combinations of chapters and verses. I had to so if you look at it on your plan, and I mean, if you're just like reading it, it's not a big deal. If you're taking notes, it's a little bit harder to get it organized in your mind. So I organized it and I made it more understandable for this recap.
Good, because I was being in there's a couple things I had flashbacks of, man, there was a time in this podcast where we were in it and we were like, oh, we're starting a new book. Let's talk about what that book is. Who wrote it? When was it written? And now that would take 2 hours because we've got all
there are so many.
Yeah, and then even last week we're like, oh, that's so awesome. David was writing that when he was going through this. And now I'm like, please just give me one piece of it. I don't need all of it shoved into one.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah. And that was the other thing. We had Psalms too. Okay, so we looked at then 1 Samuel chapter 22 through 1 Samuel 31, close out 1 Samuel. Then we got into 2 Samuel chapter 1 through chapter 6, most of chapter 6. We randomly hit 2 Samuel 23 verses 8 through 17. Then we got into 1 Chronicles, couple verses of chapter 3, couple verses of chapter 9, all of 10, 11, 12, and 13, and then a couple verses of 1 Chronicles chapter 14. And we also had Psalms 57, 142, 52, and 54, and 56.
This is how Bibles get ruined. Do you see how thin these pages are? That much page flipping? That's how you rip in half.
Yeah, if you're not using your phone to use the phone. Because I actually was picturing you, because I was like, doesn't Eric read out of he's got his paper one?
Yeah.
And I usually am listening it on here, but then I open it on the internet so I can copy and paste verses and take notes and stuff. And I was hopping all over the place. I'm like, I can't imagine how this would be for Eric with this paper Bible. Flipping back and forth every 2 verses.
Listen, I ordered 2 more Bibles this week just to prepare for what's happening.
To prepare, so you can have one open per book.
Yeah, I'm just gonna have them all around.
Yeah. Okay, so then what I did then for my recap was I left my Samuel and Psalms recaps in chronological order, and then I put all of the Chronicles just right at the end. I'm not even going to mention the recap for those, because those were basically just recaps of the other chapters. So
I love it.
For the sake of this, I will tell you that the recap is going to be 1 Samuel 22 to 31, 2 Samuel 1 through 6, and the Psalms that are thrown in there. So here it is. The recap. Okay. Saul kills priests. Save me, save me. Don't boast about wrongdoings. Pursuit and betrayal. Save me. Spare the enemy. Abigail. Spare the repeat offender. The enemy of my enemy. Samuel's spirit. So much for the enemy of my enemy. In God I trust. Destroying the raid. Saul falls on his sword. Mourn the enemy. 2 kings, 2 generals. My bitter enemy. They killed his enemy. Nation united. Ark retrieval attempted. That is our recap.
Boom.
And then there's Chronicles after that, but those were basically all repeats of literally everything we just talked about.
I'll tell, and so I'm just making sure, because like I said, I'm a little not sure where I'm at. I'm trying to get my bearings. But what was funny is, even in reading this, I remember I hopped on and I got to Psalm 56, and I was like, oh, that's so cool, because it's like trusting in God in the midst of fear. And I'm like, awesome, I'm going to read that. But then, of course, right after it is Psalm 57, and it's God's faithful help and love in times of trouble. And like, I'm like, ooh, that's apt. Yeah, people can apply that right now. And I kept reading. I'm like, that's not even on the list. I
It's
just
not,
kept
no.
going. Like,
And
so
we did talk about how there's so many Psalms that are written by David, and we were like, how are they going to fit that in there?
yeah.
Throwing a bunch in.
Just hammer them. So you know what? At least like I felt like the Psalms were really speaking to me. So that I at least can go through and check those boxes on my reading plan on my phone. But yeah, a lot of the other stuff was very.
This is like, so I do want to say this as a recommendation for those of you that are reading through the Bible in a year with like this chronological plan. I would definitely say either A, do it right off of your phone, the YouVersion app, because it can get really confusing flipping back and forth, or B, buy a paperback chronological Bible, which is also available, because this is all over the place. It will frustrate you. So that would be the option I would go for, one of those two. But what I really felt like, and this, I felt like this came up a lot, enemies. I felt like that was the big central focus of this whole week. I mean, if you go through, and I think the big ones, which I did put in my recap, spare the enemy, spare the repeat offender, the enemy of my enemy, mourn the enemy, my bitter enemy, they killed his enemy. And there are all these different instances where it came down to basically, how did David treat his enemy? And he wasn't infallible in this. In fact, speaking of, all right, I'm going to say something about women now, because Eric's always making fun of me about not mentioning it.
See, put it in there.
Yeah, but Abigail, who is like the hero, comes in 1 Samuel 25, actually keeps David from committing murder against somebody who is his enemy, even though he did really great in all the other instances. But Abigail was his check in that one instance where he didn't quite get it right. But it really came down to, how did David treat his enemy? So we first see it in 1 Samuel 24. David and his people are hiding out in a cave. Saul's trying to kill him. Saul goes into the cave, and David has this chance to take him out. His people are like, take him out. I mean, God obviously put him there, which every time I read that story, I was like, would I think, yeah, man, God definitely handed him over to me. You know, those, I don't know. Just like, I just thought to myself, would I be able to say, no, that's probably not right?
Well, and that's the thing. It's like, if you look at stories leading up to this, a lot of things that just people happened upon, or those situations that it was like, wait, why did that? Everybody gave credit, like, oh yeah, God totally put this here. And a lot of the human reaction leading up to this has been, well, God put this here, so I'll do it. Like that's, I can go ahead because God must be blessing this, or God must have put this here. So now my human reaction, oh, that's totally justified. I'm going to go ahead and do it. But in this one, it's like, okay, it's right there. No, I'm right from wrong is outweighing the circumstance that Saul's right there. Yeah. So.
But it was very interesting, because this is where David does the non-cultural, I guess I want to say, action, and he says, I'm not going to kill the guy who's literally trying to kill me, because God has put him in power. And you know, talk about like relating to today. Are there people who are in leadership over you where you're like, I despise this person? And they are out for you. And everybody around you is saying, smack them.
We love everyone on this podcast. We love everyone. We should not get into who's right, who's wrong, who do we like, who do we don't. Yeah, you respect a position of power. And that's where I wonder where these conversations come in, because it's like, in the Samuel part of it, like, okay, Saul's not in anymore. I screwed up. Shouldn't do that. Like, David's like, well, God put him in power. Like, David doesn't know that God doesn't want him in power. Like, God made a mistake. He owned up to it. He's like, no, that wasn't it. Like,
Yeah.
so maybe that was, yeah, it's just, we look at the human element of things and how we can twist certain things and we can make it how we want. But David was so, I don't know if justified is the word, but to take Saul out right there, and he would have been celebrated. It would have been where it wanted to be, and he could even went even so far to say, you know what? God even said he made a mistake, so God didn't even want him in power. So you know what? I took care of that. It was God's will, and he didn't. He's like, nope. He was put in that position. He was called to that position. I respect that. I have every reason to do this, but I'm not going to. So
Yeah.
I think that's huge, and I think speaking to character is a big part of David's story, and seeing even when he falls and even when he screws up, he still tries to make it right. He still tries to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Takes him a few tries later on, but you know.
So spare the enemy. He does that. Then there's a second moment, which I summarize as spare the repeat offender. Saul comes after him again. So the first time he spares him, Saul's like, oh yeah, you're totally right. I was in the wrong. And you're like, oh yeah, they reconcile. Nope, Saul keeps trying to kill him.
You know,
David spares his life a second time. And it's like, listen, I took your spear and stuff. I mean, obviously I was right over you while you were sleeping. I could have killed you, but I didn't. So not only does he spare his enemy, but he spares what is essentially a repeat offender. And again, this so much applies to us. Like, there are repeat offenders in our lives where we're like, all right, we forgave him once. This is my relating to Jesus, by the way, because
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure there's a story where Jesus talks about this for a little while.
Yeah, where his disciples are like, how many times should I let him do this? You know, like, they just keep attacking me. And Jesus says, just keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. And David does the same thing. Saul comes after him. He spares his life, comes after him again. He spares his life. And Saul just keeps trying to kill him. And he doesn't attack him. And so what does that say to us about, all right, then who are the repeat offenders in our lives? Who we're just like kind of fed up, and we're like, all right, it's been too many times. They've tried to kill me too many times. Like, now I have drawn the line. And once again, Saul's guy who is with him says, don't you think God has put him in your hands? Like, this is obviously divine. He's been trying to kill you. You didn't kill him the first time. I mean, I think pretty sure God's like, yeah, you can kill him this time. But again, David does not. So.
Yeah. And I think it's in our world, like, that relatable. I think making sure that we put up boundaries, like we put up things that keep us safe, keep us from going in the wrong direction. The unfriend button on Facebook works. So, like, it's very simple it's very easy to write the reply to somebody's post that you don't like, or to lash out. But you could just, you know what, we're just going to take a break for a little while. Maybe I'm going to let that step back, and maybe that's a boundary that you can use and go that way. But yeah, I think we so quickly, do you remember what that person did? Oh yeah, I remember that. Okay, well, because of their past, I am going to lash out, and I'm going to act a certain way. And it's like, well, maybe we just we can't change them. We can't fix it all the time, but we can put up boundaries, and we can keep forgiving. We can keep moving forward. We can keep giving them chances, but just making sure we do it safely and not to where it's going to harm us. But
yeah, for
unless
sure.
they're out to kill you, then.
I mean, if you even think about it from the perspective of David, basically the second time David spares Saul, Saul's like, yeah, no, you're right. Come on back home with me. Tell you what, David did not go back home with that guy, because he's like, I know this is not safe. I'm going to spare your life, but I'm not returning to Israel with you.
I'm not getting in that. Not getting in that, man. No way.
I'm not. So all that to say, you can forgive and spare the repeat offender, but don't go back with them if you have the option.
Yeah. If it's not safe, don't do it. Don't do
it. Don't do it. Okay, so spare the enemy, spare the repeat offender, and then David goes to a whole different level. We see it in 2 Samuel chapter 1. Saul dies, and obviously Jonathan dies. Jonathan is David's friend, so of course David's going to be sad that Jonathan died, right? But
soul
he
friend.
actually, yeah, his soul friend. But he mourns, and he mourns for Jonathan, but he also mourns for Saul. He actually takes out the people who said that they killed Saul, because the people are like, oh, we killed David's enemy, he's gonna be so excited. And David's like, I'm not excited. I didn't kill this guy. Why do you think I would be happy if you did? But he actually, like, he deeply mourns his enemy. And I was struck because I was listening to, actually someone else was listening to it, I just happened to walk through the room, this guy who was talking about marriage, and he was talking about when his relationship with him and his wife, when he is angry at somebody else, it affects his relationship with his wife, even if he's not angry at her. But what he was talking about is he was talking about this enemy that he had, who was this person that continually hurt him. And he said one day, God said, I want you to pray for that person. And he was like, and he's like, okay, fine. I didn't really want to do it, but I'll do it. And he's like, and then God told me to bless that person. And I was like, God, I'm just really concerned, because if I pray and ask you to bless them, and you actually bless them, then I'm gonna have a problem with you. Which was funny. But what he said was, he said, I just kept praying for this and blessing this person, and then, like, after 10 days, it was like I had this breakthrough where I finally had reached this plan of forgiveness. And this again goes back to Jesus, because, spoiler alert, we go to the book of Matthew, and Jesus is talking to people, and he says, Matthew chapter 5, starting verse 43, you've heard the law that says, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, which is exactly what David's men were talking about.
Yeah.
Love your neighbor, hate your enemy. But I say, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. And in that way, you'll be acting as true children of your Father in heaven. And this is basically, I mean, if you look at the enemies in your life, are you praying for them? Can you say that if your enemy experiences a tragic event, would you mourn for them? Because that's what David does. This guy, I mean, Saul, has been chasing him to kill him, gave his wife to some other random person, and just like again and again and again and again has been just coming after David, and Saul dies, and David mourns for him. I mean, that's crazy.
Not only that, he mourns for him, but I mean, he teaches others. Like, he teaches others that this is how we should be mourning and grieving over this. This is how we should do this. Like, he's this kind of picture of what to do in that situation. I think that's so huge to look at and say, not only did he act that way, but he used that to really make sure people saw and people did what they were supposed to do. It's like, yeah, it's a great example for, I have every reason to be the one that's celebrating this and excited and fired up. But you know what? This is the right thing to do. Do the right thing. Do the next right thing. Like, that's a big part of David's story. And he has a couple of moments where he doesn't do the right thing, the next right thing.
Yeah.
But eventually he comes back. And this is a good example of him doing the next right thing.
So, spare your enemy, spare the repeat offender, mourn your enemy. And then I think the final one that I kind of landed on, there are some other principles that you can get out of, but if we're focusing solely on David, the last one would be those people that killed his enemy. You know, because there were people who, I mean, most of them didn't actually kill his enemy. They just said they did because they made bad choices. But David was so for his enemy that he even got angry on his enemy's behalf. There's actually a proverb that says, I think it's the 23rd, Proverbs 23, and it says, do not rejoice when your enemy stumbles. Wait, now I'm.
Oh man, I was trying to go for it.
It was in my mind. But basically, when it stumbles, do not let your heart rejoice, or the Lord will see and disapprove and turn his wrath away from them. That's basically what the verse is.
Oh.
And so, even in this, what David could see as, and he does see it as divine. He says, previous to this many times, God will be my justice. He's going to take out the people who are after me. And it does say, God took out Saul. But even in this, like, David does not rejoice when his enemy dies. And he mourns for him. But even on the other side of that, he even defends Saul to other people. So it's not just like, yeah, we can pray for our enemies. We can bless our enemies. But if our enemies are down and out and they're struggling, are we the type of people who can go and stand by them, defend them, and help them out?
People are still people. That's what you still have to care about people. It's part of your care. You still need to care about people. Once again, that person can be a bad person. That person can be whatever you want to put in there, but you have to care about people. I think that's what you still have to care about people the correct way. And I wonder how much of this is, it's not so much Saul, and it's a lot of respect to Jonathan too. I mean, him and Jonathan were pretty good friends. I mean, she shot an arrow and then they had a conversation about it.
Yeah. I watched last week if you don't get that joke.
They shared some good times, but so a lot of it might just be that family respect of, yeah, it's still his father and it's still somebody who was that important to me, and still taking that time with it. So I don't know, soul brother, his soul friend.
So I really did feel like the big theme of this was very much about enemies. Just like before we kind of wrap up, some verses that I just kind of pointed out, there were the random ones from 2 Samuel chapter 23, way in the distance, but it's talking about David's mighty men, right? And they did some crazy cool things. You should definitely read about it if you're like all about cool battles and stuff like that. These were cool people. But what stuck out to me when I was reading this is talking about the three cool guys who just took out tons of people. And it says this about two of them. So if you look at 2 Samuel 23, verses 10 and verse 12, it says, but Eleazar stood his ground and struck down the Philistines till his hand grew tired. And that's how he did his big thing. And then it goes on later, but Shammah, don't know if that's his name. Shamu. He's a win. But Shammah took his stand in the middle of the field and he defended it. And that's how he got his big battle. And so what kind of stuck out to me was in these big, great stories of these epic heroes, what happens is everybody else ran away. One guy stood his ground and God did something amazing. And so that was just kind of cool because I was like, man, how many times in our lives is there this wall that we come up against, this enemy, this army of overwhelming odds? Everybody else runs away. Can we stand our ground and trust that God is going to pull us through? Because that's when cool stuff happens.
That is, in fact, when cool stuff happens. And and this once again comes back to, how do you view David? Like the little Veggie Tales David? Is that how you get it? I mean, this is pretty, if you're rolling as one of David's mighty warriors, that's pretty sweet.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. That's a pretty cool place to be. Yeah. So, I mean, you got mighty warriors and disciples. That if who are you going to roll with at this point, this is a pretty good guy to roll with. So
next steps, mine would be how to treat an enemy. How do you treat your enemy?
Yeah. Maybe in quarantine, this is the time to make the list. Make your enemy list, and not like a hit list that you're gonna take. I'm like, how am I gonna?
As soon as I get out of here, people are cut off.
As soon as they lift this, oh man, one by one, check them off. But maybe it's the good time to really think about who are you holding grudges against, and who are you in that point with where it's. I mean, you're not gonna have to see them every day. unless you Zoom them every day, and don't do that if you don't feel comfortable.
Boundaries.
But right now there's boundaries in place. You don't have to deal with your enemies. So maybe
there's not very many boundaries better than this, especially for people who are long distance.
So think about it. Think about who you have these quarrels with. Quarrels. Who even uses that word? But anyway,
Cool
who has this, and think about, man, God, what do you want me to do with this? These are the people that I know I need to make some amends. I need to figure out how to resolve this. What do you want me to do? Maybe this is the time to put that in place and start figuring those things out. So that could be a good next step. Enemy hit list. Next step.
Right.
Hit him with Jesus. Hit him with Jesus.
Yes.
And prayer and love and kindness. That's what you're hitting with.
So cool. Thank you for listening to What Now with Ann and Eric in this very weird week of reading. It was weird for everybody.
Listen, this is quarantine.
We didn't even follow our usual format.
Yeah, this is quarantine life. It's gonna get weird. It's gonna get crazy.
Yeah, it's gonna get weird. But stick to it and think, what do you need to say no to get through your reading plan? And I'm talking to you, Eric.
I know, you're talking directly to me. I get it.
Eye contact.
Get my act together. I hear you loud and clear.
Cool. So we'll talk to you next week. Fairly normal people talking about the Bible. I am Anna.
I'm Eric.
And that's all I have to say.
And
Bye.
see you.